unwittingly exposes the lack of an understanding of what the people on this side of the argument have and why they're so wrong, even though they're so filled with emotion. The first point that I wanted to make from his is he says JD says he doesn't care what happens in Ukraine. I don't think that's what he says. I know for sure that he said some other things because I'm going to show it to you here in just a minute. But it's not so much a matter of not caring what happens in Ukraine as it is to recognizing what can't happen in Ukraine. And he was specifically on record as saying he opposed that $61 billion aid package earlier this year because he said it won't make any difference in the outcome. And tell me, since that bill was passed, was he proven right or was he proven wrong?
Oh, absolutely right. There's no amount of money can make up for the lack of experienced, trained troops. We've talked about that multiple times. And you know what the investment in training just one soldier is. It's multiple months and it's hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get one trained soldier to the front line. So, all of our purchases of magical equipment doesn't alter that equation.
And then the next part was kind of more what you said there. He said that he highlighted that this is the freedom, the people that are fighting for their freedom in Ukraine. It's doctors and lawyers and machinists, etc., which underscores what you're talking about. They're not trained soldiers. Right. They don't have any of the capacity that the Russian side, because they actually do have a lot of trained soldiers. They actually did one of the things earlier in the war that I actually recommended that the Ukraine side do. I recommended that they mobilize 100,000 people, take them out of contact, and spend at least 9 months, as hard as that would be, training them and equipping them with a consistent equipment set, giving them the training, the medics, the mechanics, all the things that you need to go outfit it with all the engineering capacity, ammunition, everything that you need to make a battle group, and then only then put them into combat. But they didn't do that. They just threw them into contact as soon as they could, and they got them chewed up. The Russians, however, by all that I can count, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is that when they did that big mobilization of 300,000 in the fall of 2022 and then started recruiting large numbers, they actually have, by all rights, by what I've seen, somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 troops that are out of contact even as we speak, training.
Yeah, no, I think the numbers are actually closer to 600,000. So their active duty forces are now to like 1.3 million, and I think they've got close to 600,000 deployed into the along the line of contact in Ukraine. So you're absolutely right. The Russians, and they did this in World War II as well. People forget that. They think that the Russians were just grabbing people, throwing them at the front as cannon fodder, when in fact they did a mass mobilization, but they had those bases that were to the east of the Ural Mountains, and they were able to train them up. And then you had forces with some at least minimal combat capabilities. But, as you know from your own experience, there ain't no training like being in real live fire. That's where, you're going to ultimately to get some lessons learned real quick.
Yeah, and the problem is that the Ukraine side doesn't have that luxury, because the minute that they grab them off the streets, they're throwing them into the combat. We still see reports even in the recent weeks to where guys were stolen away off the street, and 4 days later or 5 days later were on the front and dead. And that's just how it works, meaning you get literally no training. They just throw a uniform on you, hand you a rifle, and send you to the front. And the chances of them succeeding is just almost impossible. Meanwhile, the Russian side does rotate troops. They do have them trained. They do have some out of contact, and you can never match that. So the other point that he made in that, which I think is the most important failure of the side that says let's continue to support Ukraine, is that he said all we have to do is help them with financing. So he has this really, really bad mentality, and especially if someone who does have any kind of military background, to think that it's just cash. All you need is more money, not more manpower, not more trained manpower, and that's going to make a difference, is fatally wrong. And Ukraine is going to be the ones who are going to pay the fatal consequences.
Well, let me tell you, so I'm now privy to some information. I can't go into great detail on it. but there has been evidence that's been presented now to a U.S. government entity that shows that there are some corrupt Russian officers working with Ukrainian officers to stage certain combat events that are being used to justify creation of military contracts for U.S. contractors. And it's all part of an organized grift that everybody involved in the scheme gets money, including the U.S. contractors, which is why this whistleblower has come forward and is putting this forth. So what we've got going on in Ukraine is it's one of the biggest thefts in history in terms of the money that's being stolen under the pretext of fighting back, an authoritarian regime in Russia, et cetera, is enormous. And, and part of the reason is there are people in this country, U.S. contractors, U.S. military contractors who are profiting off of it. And they're connected to U.S. defense corporations. And you think, oh, that's how, how could that be? Well, it's not the first time we've seen this in war, but that's what's going on.
And you don't even need classified information to get that. That's like Gary throws up there. That's kind of out in the front and the open. That a lot of that stuff's going on here. So I want to pivot over. I want to rather pivot back to J.D. Vance. So those are the things he's been accused of. That's the mentality of the side that's opposed to him and why they're, quote, afraid of him coming in. But let's see what he actually said. Now, on I believe it was April the 12th, he wrote a piece in the New York Times where he said, hey, the problem is not a money problem. The problem is a math problem. He said that the issue just doesn't add up. And this was at the time they were still looking to fund $61 billion package for the Ukraine side. It hadn't passed at this point. And one of the things he wrote was that President Biden wants the world to believe that the biggest obstacle facing Ukraine is Republicans and our lack of commitment to the global community. This is wrong. Ukraine's challenge is not the GOP, it's math. Ukraine needs more soldiers than it can fill, even with draconian conscription policies. It needs more material than the United States can provide. This reality must inform any future Ukraine policy, from further congressional aid to the diplomatic course set by the president. So what he's saying there is, listen, things got to add up. It's fine that you want to, care about somebody else. And look, I mean, the fact is Ukraine was invaded by Russia. So any country would be within their rights to defend themselves. Fair enough. You may not like Russia. You may not want them to invade the Ukraine side. Okay, that's your prerogative as well. What's not your prerogative, though, is to say, I just want it to happen. And so even though physically it can't, I'm going to ignore that and I'm going to keep trying. That's where you have a big problem. And at least J.D. Vance is willing to look at the facts.
Well, J.D. Vance scares the establishment in Washington for the same reason that Donald Trump does. Nobody owns him. Now, in Trump's case, Trump's a multi-billionaire and they can't buy him. J.D. Vance, to his credit, we've never, at least in the last 100 years, I've been going back trying to figure it out. We've never had a vice presidential candidate like J.D. Vance, maybe with the exception of Sarah Palin, someone who came out of a middle-class American life. In fact, his was not even, and his was normal in the sense that there was lots of family drama, drug use, poverty. There was no guarantee of success. But I even exclude Harry Truman because Truman came out of a corrupt political machine. That's how he got to be a senator. Vance didn't come out of a political machine. And so the fact that they can't just pull his string and make him do what they want scares the hell out of him because he is an independent thinker. And yeah, he's 39, soon to be 40. And did he say some, bad things about Donald Trump? Absolutely. And you know what he did? He said, I was wrong. He didn't come up with some, tap dance to proclaim, well, I never really said that and I never really meant that. No, he said, hey, I saw what he did. I made a wrong judgment. Getting that kind of honesty up front is refreshing. That's not to say he's perfect on political issues, he and Donald Trump align very closely on the whole Israeli thing, which means we're not going to necessarily see much of a change in policy there. But the thing I think that Vance and Trump share in common, which again scares the hell out of the military industrial complex, is they're open to negotiation, they're open to talking, and they don't think that we need to get into a confrontation with China and Russia and Iran at the same time.
Yeah, and in fact, I want to show you here. I want to go back actually to that. Let me share my screen here. This is from that New York Times piece that he wrote, because it was something else he wrote in there I thought was really important to point out, because it shows the way his mind works. Kind of to your point there, he said Mr. Biden has failed to articulate even basic facts about what Ukraine needs and how this aid will change the reality on the ground. That's one of the things we focus on all the time here on this channel, is the reality on the ground. The most fundamental question: how much does Ukraine need and how much can we actually provide? Mr. Biden suggested a $60 billion supplemental means the difference between victory and defeat in a major war between Russia and Ukraine. That is also wrong. This $60 billion is a fraction of what it would take to turn the tide in Ukraine's favor. And as we just talked about a second ago, and as you just pointed out there, they got it. And now that here it's July, and now we're rolling through the middle of the summer, and nothing has changed at all. Russia is still continued to methodically move to the west in slow measure, but it's no different than it was in the 4 months before this happened. So we now have valid proof that it didn't happen, but still to this day, you don't have the administration, especially heading into and now out of the NATO summit, where all they want to do is more and more support. They never tell you what the objective is, how we're going to accomplish it, and how much resources it's going to cost.
Well, in fact, one of the things that has happened is the Russians really have effectively neutralized the HIMARS and ATACMS in the last 4 weeks. So before that, as we talked about a few weeks back, of that attack that took place on the beach in Sevastopol, what's happened since then is these attacks have dropped off dramatically. Why? Well, the Russians using a new drone that provides overhead surveillance reconnaissance have been more quickly identifying the mobile launchers. The same launcher is used to launch the ATACMS and the HIMARS. They've destroyed them. So they're now, the launchers to launch those things are destroyed, and Ukraine doesn't, you can stack up all the actual missiles you want, but you don't have anything to launch them out of. They're no good. And so those
there aren't that many missiles either.
Yeah, and there are not that many around. Exactly right.
I wanted to now go. So that was on the 12th of April, I believe the date. 2 days later, J.D. Vance goes on CNN, and they were going to pepper him with a lot of these same questions and a lot of the concerns that they had back then. And I want you to watch his response.
I think it is a question of either or, Jay, because it's not about the money again, it's about the weapons. If we pass the supplemental, we go from making 550 Patriot interceptors to 650. That's 100 more, and the world needs thousands of these things. So really, it goes back to the basic math of this. If you don't make enough weapons to fight 3 wars, you've got to figure out how to focus. And my proposal is we focus on ourselves and we focus on our closest allies.
Now, and what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that focus? It says the math doesn't add up, so we have limited resources. Let's use them where it's to the best benefit of the United States. Why is that so scary to so many people?
Because it's logical and rational, and Washington's not a place where logic and ration are valued. I mean, it's crazy town. It's a free for all of grift. And so what really makes a difference is, how do I get paid? It's like Cuba Gooding Jr., that actor in the Jerry Maguire movie. Show me the money. That's what it's all about. Again, here's what makes Vance also, that scares the hell out of the Democrats. Sarah Palin, nice lady, decent governor in Alaska. She was, when it came to verbal sparring, she was a white belt. J.D. Vance, when it comes to verbal sparring, the man's a double black belt.
Oh wow!
and these news anchors can't handle him, and so because he is smart, he is well read, but he's also been on the receiving end. When he went to Yale, he caught that Yale thing of the people who looked down on him because he didn't talk with an Eastern accent. He had more of that Midwest accent. like I do. And, that's just one short, it's a little shy of that Southern accent. Because, if you speak with a Southern accent, that means you're partially stupid, don't it? you know, again, it's just one of those things. I guess one of the prejudices that these East Coast liberal elites spread, show towards others. So again, JD Vance is a bit, he breaks that stereotype. And
Are you the one that I saw that sent out a tweet that said you're looking forward to the vice presidential debate? Was that you?
I wish. That? Well, I thought about that. I didn't send it. I'd love to take credit for it, but yeah, no. Listen, that's gonna. You know what? They're gonna be calling the child abuse hotline when that thing's underway. Please make him stop. He's beaten her mercilessly.
That ironically is going to be something he's going to have to be careful of, because you don't want to be seen as, quote, beating up on a woman, etc. But man, I'll never forget how the final debate that Kamala Harris was in when she was running for the nomination in 2020 was when Tulsi Gabbard just eviscerated her on that platform, from which she never recovered. And you could tell she had no idea how to respond to it. I remember watching it at the time, and I thought, okay, we'll see how she comes back. And she just had no comeback at all. And I'm like, man, if you put that on the stage with somebody like JD Vance, who, as we saw in that CNN piece there, he's very comfortable without attacking anybody, but very confident in his position and filled with facts. So I'm wondering how that's going to work out.
Yeah. He is not the choice of what I call the George W. Bush rhino crowd. The established elites, a lot of the very wealthy donors, they're just, again, it's that East Coast elite snobbery. Oh, this guy, this hillbilly from Ohio, from Appalachia territory, my God, we can't have such a man. Well, and I'm not trying to pretend that J.D. Vance is, God's gift to the Republican Party. But number one, guess who's the youngest guy in both parties running for office? J.D. Vance, about the age that John F. Kennedy was. And he is articulate. He's written a book. He can argue on his feet. He's got a lot of practical experience. And he's not some long time, political hack, been trying to figure out how he can suck off the public tit just to get one more buck in his pocket.
Yeah, and we'll see how that's going to work out. I see Gary showing up there that the Democrats are going, yeah, we can't wait, man. She's gonna do great. Well, okay, we'll see how that works out. But and listen, I'm kind of like you. I'm not a like dyed in the wool JD fan, because there's a number of his policies that I'm that are cringeworthy in my view. So I'm not totally sold, but I am completely behind, some of the ones like we just mentioned there about the war, because they're focused on our national interest. And even where I disagree with him, I at least give him credibility and respect, because he has a reason, he has a logic behind it. Even if I don't agree with it, there's something there, as opposed to too many else. And this is really on both sides of the aisle, not just the liberals, that hold an emotional position that they don't even know if it's got any fundamentals or not. And that's where the danger comes in, I think.
Yeah, I think at least in the case of J.D. Vance, that some of the positions he's taken that you and I both would find problematic, that if you could sit him down and number one, you could have a rational, intelligent discussion, debate about it. And then out of that debate, he's the type of probably say, that makes sense. And just like he changed his opinion on Donald Trump, he would change his opinion on those other issues. So, I mean, the thing I like about him is he is not this closed-minded ideologue. He is, he's open-minded, and his wife, she's going to be a secret weapon in this. So his wife, she's an Indian American. Indian East, Southeast Asia Indian, not, tribes, plains of Kansas or Nebraska. And she graduated from an Indian law school that is sort of the equivalent of Harvard, MIT. So she is no dummy. She's a very smart, capable woman. And they want to attack him as a racist. He's married to a woman of color. You know what?
Yeah.
Good luck. Good luck with that attack, guys.
Yeah, that's not going to work out too well there, but that's a good looking couple.